Let's see. So today we are going to start talking about chapter 6. Chapter 6 is going to cover a number of things. We did a project about it last class, or technically, chapter 5 was about the for today lecture, technically. And project 6 also for today lecture. So after we will complete the lecture, we are going to yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So back again. And project 6 we will also cover the part of the lecture today. So let's go ahead and dig into the lecture for today, see what's going on. I think you see my screen. So after we complete, we will talk more about it. So you should see it. Yes. Now, chapter 6 is going to cover the programming languages. There's a lot of programming languages we use. However, it was necessary to understand databases before we dig into the programming languages. Objective is going to learn about common threads in programming languages environment, the risk unrestricted user input, and so on as we go through. So what's a programming language? It's the convenience structure that keep a program from needing to speak the native language of the machine. So rather than having a program being written in 010101, I remember one of my coworkers, he was telling me a couple of years ago that when he got hired the first time, because he know the machine language, and they hired him because he then 30 years ago know exactly how to program in machine language, and that's why they hired him. So he know how the switches, the on and off, and then they hired him, and he kept working in the same exact place that I ended working in. So programming, rather than typing the 0 and 1 or putting switches or whatever, the machine language, now the programming language is another way that we can type something in an easy way, sometimes just like English, to create a program. So programming language is the convenient structure that keep a program from needing to speak the native language of the machine. They are written in a combination of variables and near human terms that's similar to the meaning of a human language. If I want to bring a good example for that, going to be Python. Python is one of really I'm finding Python is really near from the human language. I was thinking that, hey, no, but Python is so near from human language or English language. Common function needed for most of the program are available within libraries for different languages. So technically, there's a library. Technically, the programmer will not keep writing the same exact thing again and again and again. In fact, there's other ways, like the program. One day I before even I start teaching, like 9 years ago, 7 years ago, before I start teaching a couple of years ago, I ended up being data analysis, and I have a databases, I have the application. So because this company had the contract with the government, the internal and external services are matching the data. So technically, we have internal individual, which is me, to report something, and there's external office, which is not related to the company, going to report the data, and they will compare and they will say, yeah, this is accurate, because two individuals not sitting in the same exact place using different ways had reported the same exact outcome. And so what I did, rather than keep building it from beginning, I noticed that if I'm looking for number of individual who went to hospital in August, it will be the same exact thing for September, right? So it's the same exact reporting. So I just changed the month of that, and by that I created my own library. Whenever someone called me and say, hey, we need to have this report, I can generate it within a couple of minutes and send it, compile it and send it to them saying that's the outcome of that report. Same thing. So I created my own library. Same thing. Programming language, rather than building a program from scratch and keep building a program from scratch, what you do, you are going to use libraries like the form for login. It's the same. You have the form to log in, the username and password, and click login. So we can change in the structure, but that code is the same, and that's why we call it library. So there's a huge number of libraries. We have something called API, which is application programming interfaces, have been created to allow a system to call existing functionality in another module or another system through a specific interface. What the meaning of that? Until today, I do a lot of website programming. Between now and then, I get a friend or someone who asks me to build a website for them, and when I do that, I need to use Google APIs, which technically it gives me a lot of things, from the ability to integrate maps, to call email and information, call a lot of things about the user. I can manipulate it how I want. So I use APIs, and APIs is just a way to interact with the system through your system. So application programming interfaces, APIs. Compiling is the process of translating the high-level language into a native machine language, translating your Python, your C++, your C language, JavaScript into zeros and ones. That's compiling, making sure that it's going to work. That code will be checked for errors, because if it's giving error, it will say, hey, that's error, cannot be happening like this way, and now you need to correct it, otherwise it will not produce an accurate information. That's compiling. You switch it from one level to, from high level to low level. That's compiling. And interrupted language is one that has a lower layer of machine language that is dynamically reads and interrupts commands from a higher level language. Buffer overflow. A buffer patching or a buffer overflow, we did project 5 was about it. And technically, because we use a lot of variables in terms of our languages, because we are going to use a variable to store temporary data or to store data in a places. So we call it variable, then we take this variable and we store it in a database. So if this database, it's 32-bit, this location is 32-bit, what happens if I send a command that has 64-bit, for example? It's more than the 32-bit. And that's what we call it, a buffer overflow. It says the most general sense is when more information is written to a location than the location can hold, and that's a buffer overflow. Most buffer overflows in programming result from a lack of constraint on the amount of input that's allowed, or the mishandling of pointer variables. So technically, my variable, I assign it to be a 32-bit, but my data is 64-bit. Now, where I will start, store the other 32-bit? There's an overflow over here. how I can fix it, what I need to do. There are defenses against buffer overflow. Through none of them are perfect, like using arrays. Array rather than a variable. What the meaning of an array? Now I can have an array that has like 9 locations where I can store it in. Maybe I will store 2 or 3, but I have much more time. My question will say, what if I went more than what the array can handle? What's going to happen? That's a buffer overflow. Pointer handling, indirection, data carrier, canaries, restrict read and write limits. There's a lot of ways that we can do in through a programming to at least fix the buffer overflow. Stock overflow. 2 methods to prevent smashing the stock. Stock canaries, which is a stock canary is a random chosen small integer value that is placed in a stock adjunct to the return address for code execution. A non-executable stock is the system level protection, wherein some partitions of memory are not allowed to contain executable code. That's one of the ways that we can protect the systems. Good input. Now, if I created a system, by the way, that's the true story. I created an application using a PHP, and I didn't care at then because I was just learning. This is in 2006, I want to say 6 or 7. I did this website. It's too old. It's not anymore in exist, but I did it. So this website, when I created, I just need to have. I was thinking about how I can collect data and store it in the database. That's it. That's what I was thinking about. But after a while, I start thinking, what if someone did put an incorrect information? It will take it. And that's over here is one of the things that we can talk about. Input validation is a common tool used in developing systems. This, assert that information entered by the user is the proper format for the system to be, to process. For example, I'm asking someone to write down their phone number. So I have 3 letters or 3 numbers for the area code. I have 3 and another 7 numbers for my phone number. So if someone went ahead and put 10 or it put 11 or 15, that's not correct formatting and it should be rejected. I'm asking someone to put the date of birth, so 01/01/2000 is how I want it, but someone went ahead and put 2001. It's a different format. I need to correct it. I need to ask the user to, hey, go ahead and correct this. So I need to have something called input validation. Input validation at the front end of application is a wonderful for getting legitimate user to line up correctly, but the attacker can, manipulate the overflow, this input validation. If the system validation is not done on the back end of the system, your initial input validation is, meaningless of the terms of the attack or the meaning of that. I can say, hey, I need you to put 3 digits for area codes and the other 7 digits for your phone number. But what if my system didn't do anything? What if my system don't care about if I put 10 or 20 or 25 number? What's going to happen? The attacker can use it. GIT, there are several state path rules that should be employed within a system, but most of all within the GIT system. Never execute your input. So we had a lot of problems when it comes to codes and coding, especially with website, where an attacker will put either an SQL injection code or another injection code where they will try to sneak into the system, a shell code, into a search box, and they will search it. If you don't monitor this, if you don't say, hey, don't execute these words, don't use this word because these words are executable codes, what's going to happen? It will say your search term between two quotation and the code that this person did place it, going to say is not available. However, if this code, if I don't monitor it, guess what? It's going to give me the opportunity, or give the attacker the opportunity, to browse their computer, upload any shell files, and manipulate the system. So you need to never execute your input code. Keep a layer between your code and your input. Always add one level of, or layer, we call it defense in depth. Map your inspection. Good output, scrubbing is different than input scrubbing, because you do not need to worry about format and injection unless you are passing user input through your system into another external component. What the meaning of that? Encrypt information that is secret. Include include only what necessary for the external to be processed, and do not assume trust of the existing system. I think I've already had the other lecture that I have picture about. Let me say I have system A and system B. I have two systems. I have system A and system B. Now the user did input information in system A, and these information going to be stored in system B. What's going on? Oh, good. Bad weather. Okay. So this information that was collected in system A going to be stored in system B. Who's responsible for protecting the information, to validate the information? System A or system B? Who knows? Who can give me a suggestion? Anyone? Anyone thinks about it? Who saw the video? You have two systems, system A and system B. The user inputting data into system A, and this data will be sent out from system A to be stored in system B. Which one is responsible for protecting and validating the information, system A or system B?
System A.
I have one saying system A. Who says system B? Actually, both systems are responsible for securing or validating the information. You cannot assume that system A will protect the information if it's going to store it in system B, and system B cannot say, hey, they are validating the information, I'm good, I must validate my information before I store it. System A cannot produce bad outcome, cannot send a bad data, garbage in, garbage out. So I don't want to send out garbage to the other system to store it. Okay, so the both system A and system B need to validate the data to make sure I have a good results. So the input that the user did, put it into system A, need to be validated, and then the information will be sent to system B, need to be validated, and system B need to validate the data to ensure that the data is accurate and I have correct information, not incorrect information. So inherited or inheritance over doing overloads, two consideration that need to be made within dealing with the secure code. Inheritance, which is the use of the base parent class and defining specific extensions of it, and overload, which is the redefinition of existing operation for a new class. That's more in programming. If you had a programming class, you will see that we are talking about C language and C++. The following identities Some of the highest reported vulnerabilities of these languages with and what you can do to mitigate them. C has the main vulnerabilities is sustainable or sustainability to buffer overflow and data type mismatch in C++. The main language used to infrastructure along with the C++ falls victim to the buffer overflow as easily as C. No inheritance bounds a check occurs in other languages and so on. Java is one of the most popular and powerful languages. Java was designed to have the highest interoperability of any language in existing. The highest risk of Java is the ability to call out external executions or exceptions and inject OS commands, operating system commands. The C language or is Microsoft's answer to Java. It exists on the .NET platform from Microsoft, which insulates it's from most of the usual suspect when it comes to exploits. The most significant risk in using any .NET application is specifying an unsafe block of code. Visual Basic, although it has lost out for most thick client development, Visual Basic has found a new life in active server pages, ASP, active server pages, remote code execution to build item on the list of Visual Basic. Perel is often called the duct tape of the internet because it of the equal power of ability to compile on demand within the server environment. It's vulnerable to command injection. PHP is another common language used for web application. In practice, sending malicious form data could actually corrupt the internal data of a PHP application and run the arbitrary code or simple cause a system crash. If you don't validate whatever language you're saying, if you don't validate the information, if you don't know your weaknesses in the program, it will cause problems later on if you deploy it. Deploying issues. There are generally no way to get rid of the system calls that allow for compromise in the mirrored network of libraries and systems function calls that have been constructed. If you are using any portion of external system, make sure it is running at at the latest version of within all of the security patches in place. However, too much information giving in an error log on deployed system can let attackers know just what state they are they need to trigger off your compromise for a compromise. So technically, based on what you're using, the data you're using, you can make sure that you don't deploy issues. And if you're deploying system like APIs, make sure that you use the most updated one or the most patched one so you can secure your system. That's your lecture. My advice also is to go and review the video that I placed about the input validation from last semester. I was talking about the project and I created a lecture for input validation. It has more information about how to validate information. So let's go ahead and talk about your project 6. I know that some of the student asking, hey, I have until each module, I have a couple of weeks to complete the work. You may notice when we had the end of the other module that there's a lot of work to be done to complete it. So that's why I say make sure that you do the work just before it's too late. Now, this is talking about input validation. You may run something and you may cause a problem. Do you have a question? So over here, they are giving example of occurrences that happen with input validation. And I think let me see if I can pull out the old lecture, because I had a nice let me put it over here, a nice uh, photo about it. Where's your that's, yeah, validation. Okay, OneDrive. I don't know why, but OneDrive always asking me to log in back into OneDrive. Input validation. So let's talk about input validation. I have that presentation over here. Input validation. Let's talk about it. In information security, we have something called the triad of information security, the CIA triad, including confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The integrity definition, we should have an accurate information, updated, and only authorized individual can change, alter the data. From that perspective, input validation get the importance of security, securing the data. So what if, this is an example. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I have like windy nearby, so that's why it's okay. So for the use example, and this lady get a call from her son's school saying that, did he break something? And actually they are asking, did you call your son Robert drop table students? And they actually, the name of the student is that. They didn't validate a table called they didn't validate the information. And what's happened, that it took execute drop table student and they lost the data for their students. That's input validation. That's one of the examples that it's funny and sad at the same exact time, because they lost the data because guess what, they didn't validate that this data is in a name, not an execution. Input validation is the first line of defense for securing code. Hackers attacks website by sending malicious input. This could be through a web form or an AJAX request, or by sending requests directly to your API within tools such as curl or Python, by sending an intercepting proxy and whatever. They will try to find a way to pass through the system. So what is input validation? Input validation means to check on server side that the input supplied by the user or attacker is of the form that you expect it to be. If it is not of the right form, then the data should be rejected, typically within a code, which is, we call it 400 HTTP status code. What is input validation? So when I reject, what's the right form? At minimum, they should be checked the length of the data, the set of the characteristics that I'm using for that data. So if it's numbers, should be numbers. If it's letters, should be only letters. Sometimes there are more specific restriction on the data. For example, phone number. I should check for phone number. For example, if I'm having an international phone number or a local phone number, that's a different. I need to check. Last thing, some systems do not accept spaces. Some of the systems do not accept hyphenation. Some of some of Spanish family, they have a hyphenation in their name. And in the last name I'm meaning. And now, if my system do not accept special characters, now I will have a problem. So I need to validate on that. Email address. Email address will always be something at Gmail, Yahoo, or whatever, .com, .net. So I need to validate about this. If I don't validate, I will have bad data. Quantity. What if I want to have 900 or 100 and my quantity is like A or B? That's cannot be. Two type of input validation strategies we have: whitelist and blacklist. Exactly as allowed of and anything else is rejected, that's a whitelist. So I'm going to say I'm allowing the username to be whatever they want, to be like 10 characters. I'm allowing this to be that, and I will say what I'm allowing. Whitelist validation is general defense that is not targeted toward a specific attack and can often stop attack that you may not foresee. A blacklist, which is the tells what is not allowed and accept everything else. A blacklist validates rules out dangerous characteristics for a specific attack that have in mind. So technically, what the meaning of that? I can say accept everything and reject only these words. Now, if you have a before Facebook, before we have apps, before we have phones, we had the period where we had a lot of forums, we have a lot of blogs, and you have a lot of people in these blogs, and if you manage these blogs, you will be required to monitor what they are saying, what they are typing, and so on. So you will say what you accept and what you reject to a system, and whenever a rejected word will show up, it's stars or dashes or dot will show up because this word is rejected or specific words are rejected, so it will not show. And by that, I can protect. If I can know what type of codes the attacker use, I can put these words and I protect from it. That's a blacklist. And I will protect myself from attacks I know. But what about attacks that I don't know? If I don't combine these two, if I don't combine the two lists, I will have a problem. I can block out and reject specific words through the blacklist. But if I don't use whitelist, I may have an attack because in the blacklist, if I did not put the code, the blacklist will not reject it. So it will accept it. Now, what if I use a whitelist saying what I accept? In here, I will be much more protected. Now you will say why I don't keep only using whitelist, why I need to use a blacklist. In case of something slip through the faults or through the cracks, you have another way of defense. And that's what I'm mentioning when you need to use both of them. So over here, you can see blacklist should never be relied upon by itself. I need to use both methods. Validation must happen on the server side and should be done before you do anything else with the data. So technically, the moment that the user hit submit, here we should have a validation, or while the user are typing, I should have a validation. Otherwise, if hit submit and I didn't validate, it will be stored on the server. Any data that you use that an attacker can manipulate on an application should be validated. Anything that you collect should be validated. Data should be validated immediately before doing anything else on the server. Okay, and this is where I brought in my example of A and B, system A and system B, where you want to set, and technically both systems need to be set the data. Both system for validating the input. Here is data sanitization, which is technically cleaning your data. You don't want to have bad data in, so you need to clean it. There's a number of ways that you can clean out data, make it sanitized, make sure that it's clean, nice to be stored in. And that's what sanitizing. So let's go ahead and talk about your project. This is project 6 of the code. It has a number of things in front of you. I like your project because it's easy. it explain everything, then it will give you a task. This is the lab. So let me go ahead and pull my Visual Basic or Visual Studio. And then I will pull out your file and put validation. So you can see, I'm going to switch you to my other screen, by the way. You share, you will go to this screen and share. Now you see my other screen. So technically the camera is here. So that's why I'm not going to look at you. Over here we have visual, C++ code over here, where it will ask you to type this code and run it. And we'll ask you to input some information. These information like -5 and 110. And can you run the application? Now, do you know someone who is -5 years old? The answer is no. But if I type -5, 10, 10, sorry, 10, 110, I want to have a reason. 10, 10, 10, and 10 should be done. 10. Now I have an average of 18. So it did calculate it. It did take, if I kept saying sorry. Yeah, I know. If I kept typing -5 as age, that's wrong. So we'll take it. Okay, -5, -5. And the average age is now minus almost 10. So that's wrong. Wrong in calculation. The code is executing correctly. The coding is correct. However, I'm not validating the data. So what if I kept typing 110, 110, 110, 110, 110, or this is 10. And now I have average of 80. Have you ever knew someone who's 110? Or let's go ahead. Sorry, let's go ahead. And they are age of, this person is 1,000 year. So do you know someone that 1,000 years old? No. So my input validate, my program is correct, running correctly, but I'm not validating that data. So it will ask you to use some coding to validate. So technically, and if you don't know, the answer of the project is in the same exact project. Because if you go just scroll up, you see the answer over here that I'm highlighting. Oh, you don't see it. This is this is your project. This is the lab that you should type. And if you scroll up, this is the answer. Over here is your answer. So you just need to recode this in front of you. So if you went ahead and you said, while the age, I'm collecting the age, while is between, the age should be between 1 year old and 110 years old. And if I put it incorrectly, I should have to say something. So let's go ahead and type this. Where's showing up? Okay, over here. So if I said -5, it should say enter a number between 1 and 110. It did not take -5. 111, enter number between 100 and 110. So it's 1 year old. It will take it as normal until I collect what I looking, and my average years old is 1. and that's your program. So the answer is in the same exact, and you will keep looking how I can validate this, how I can do it. The answer is over here. If you look over here, that's what how you want to validate your data. That's how you figure out what you should do to validate the data and not accept anyone between the -5 and 110. Okay. That's number 4. Change the program to properly validate input over here. The answer is over here. So technically just play smart. Take it, change the information. Value should be age, MIS should be 1, value should be 8, the max should be 110, and you just change the minimum and maximum and just copy the same exact thing and put it over there. That's it. Questions? No questions? Wow, that's nice. Okay, then, if you don't have any other questions, then see you next week. Yes? Okay.
See you.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe.